Welcome back to another Intro to Jazz Vinyl 2021. We're following up on the Blue Note Classic series and the Blue Note 80th series with the Blue Note Tone Poet series. So, Tone Poet series is identifiable through this hype sticker here. This is Tone Poet in big letters. Let's talk a little bit about what the Tone Poet series is and how that's different than the Blue Note 80th and Blue Note Classic series. The Blue Note Tone Poet series, as you'll see, is a pretty interesting meeting point of the past and the present and the future of jazz audiophile reissues. The Tone Poet in question is someone named Joe Harley, who was identified by the president of Blue Note Records, Don Was, as somebody who really understood how to do a great reissue of a Blue Note record. Don Was perhaps particularly interested in this because he spearheaded the 75th anniversary of Blue Note Records reissue series in 2014, and that was a decidedly mixed bag. After that happened, he conscripted Joe Harley to begin a reissue series doing everything really as good as it could possibly be done, and we'll get into what that means exactly shortly here. And where he knew Joe Harley from will come in a later video, but Joe Harley was working on another reissue series. So Joe Harley is the Tone Poet. The Tone Poet reissue series is a mixture of kind of deep cuts of the Blue Note catalog. So for instance, this one that just came out, The Witch Doctor, is an album that was recorded, I think, in 1962, but 61, but wasn't released until 1969. So these are records that aren't necessarily going to be in somebody's top, 100 Blue Note records list because it's out of the kind of window of the most famous, most classic Blue Note records. The other interesting thing about the Tone Poet series is Joe Harley is not afraid to go beyond Blue Note records themselves into some of the other catalogs that are owned by Blue Note Records. So for example, this is Pacific Jazz Records, which was a subsidiary of World Pacific Records. And this album, Katanga, I don't know the album very well, so I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But anyways, by Curtis Amy, who is a saxophonist, is also a Tone Poet release. Probably the most famous Tone Poet release that's been on a separate label so far. There's a couple. One would be Chet Baker Sings, also on Pacific Jazz. And then there's another album called Money Jungle with Max Roach, Duke Ellington, and Charles Mingus. And that was originally released by United Artists. So let's look at what makes a Tone Poet a Tone Poet. Again, here's the hype sticker. It gives you some of the basic information there. It's mastered all from the original analog tapes. And it was mastered by Kevin Gray and Joe Harley, the Tone Poet. Sometimes Joe Harley is credited in the runout, so we'll see on this one, I don't know. Sometimes he's not. These albums tend to come in these really glossy, heavy-duty Stoughton gatefold jackets. And inside, you can see we have these awesome session photos. So, Alfred Lyon, one of the owners of Blue Note Records, was also a prolific amateur photographer, and these session photos all come from Alfred Lyon. And it looks as though, okay, so I think this is still at Rudy Van Gelder's, or at least this shot is from Van Gelder's studios in Hackensack, New Jersey, which was his parents' house. But I believe that we can see kind of the window, the shade in his parents' living room, which is kind of a neat thing. So these session photos probably aren't from this actual session, but at least it's the cast of characters. And when Blue Note or Pacific Jazz, whenever there is a session photo or session photos from it, these Tone Poets tend to come in this gatefold. One quick side note, sometimes you do get a seam split happening in here. And a lot of people feel like that has something to do with the opening of the gatefold because it does make kind of that crinkle noise. I don't think that's what it comes from at all. I think the seam split at the back happens when the record is bouncing around in the sleeve and it slides too far out what would be like the back here and can poke a hole there. These records come in this clear poly inner. And let's see what the runout says. So this one just says, I'm going to see it, KPG, Kevin Gray at Coherent Audio. So again, Joe Harley is present for the mastering of all these. Sometimes he's in the runout, sometimes he's not. But here it is. So this is one of the Tone Poet reissues. And you can see that they've created the Blue Note artwork. If I can hold this up the right way. Here we go. And it's in stereo. The preference for these records tends to be stereo. That's Joe Harley's decision. And I think one of the things that the stereo has going for it is that those tapes maybe haven't been used as much for some of the older releases. Now let's take a look at the other Tone Poet release that just came out. Again, not a Blue Note Records record. And you'll notice that this is a great glossy, heavy-duty Stoughton tip-on jacket, but it's not a gatefold because there's probably no session photos. Oh, this is interesting. I haven't seen this yet. This one has like a little one-sheet write-up about this, and that is something I haven't seen before. I think I own all of the Tone Poet records, and I have yet to encounter that. Let's go ahead and take a look at this record. You can see it's got a different label because it was on Pacific Jazz. I'm assuming this is a pretty faithful recreation of the original, although I don't really know, to be honest. And again, this one is just Kevin Gray at Coherent Audio. These records are cut by Kevin Gray. The lacquers are cut by Kevin Gray, and then they are plated and pressed at RTI. The jackets come from Stoughton, the Stoughton tip-on jackets, and these are probably the best value in luxury reissue right now, along with the Acoustic Sounds Verve reissue series, which we'll go over in a subsequent video. So these records, they sound great, they look great. The jackets are awesome. They're really faithful, high quality reproductions of the original jacket. And the only gripe people have about these, if they have a gripe, is just that these aren't always the most famous releases on Blue Note Records. So, Herbie Hancock, Maiden Voyage is a very famous album that people want to get their hands on. That's not going to be a Tone Poet anytime soon. One of the interesting reasons for that will come in a later video when we understand what Joe Harley was doing to catch Don Was' eye in the first place. But I'd say if you are interested in getting to know more jazz albums or more artists, the Tone Poet series is a great way to get a bunch of great sounding records in your collection that will introduce you to new people or a new period or a new record in someone's career. One of the first Tone Poet releases, for example, was a record called Etc. by Wayne Shorter, and it wasn't released when it first came out. So it was released many years later, and that's a record that even if you're a Wayne Shorter fan and you've got Speak No Evil and Juju and Night Dreamer and The Soothsayer and The All-Seeing Eye, you might have missed Etc. So the Tone Poet series is a really cool thing for that, just to fill in some of the gaps in the chronology of some artists that you may know. Highly recommended. And as always, if you have any thoughts or questions, I'd love to see them in the comments. Thanks for watching.